And so if we have a service where our lighting console decides it wants to take a break, we have the service looks programmed, just static service looks programmed to the wall that we can hit that and have a decent experience with just using that. So that was cool. For this space, we ran into some budget restrictions, and so one of those things was whether or not we put iMEG in the room or not. The room seats about 1,000 people, so it's a big room. But we really talked about whether iMEG was really necessary for that space or not. And from a dollar standpoint, it didn't seem necessary. But we did do iMEG in that space, and one of the cool things that allowed us to do is to take that LED screen and bring it pretty low to the floor. And what we did do is we put in all the infrastructure in case that opened up in the future. So all of the conduit runs, we planned out all of the camera locations, all like a camera control room. So all of that was planned in ahead of time, because what we have learned in our projects is that our church really loves to come up with ideas after we do something. And so the ability to say yes, yeah, there's a path from this room to that room, because we put in 2 extra conduit from every single spot, or we want to run cameras, and that's going to take a lot of space. We don't have to rip out walls or cut into concrete floors to make that happen. So that was a part of that decision. We painted the stage floor, which is awesome. It's not carpet.
No more carpet.
Praise the Lord. Yeah, we've had carpet on all of our stages, and it's kind of like a facilities thing. It's like, well, it's easier to clean. And we're like, well, but we don't want to look at it. It looks better without it. And so we found a solution. You probably know more about this, but we found like a flooring solution. There's lots of different ways that you can do a non-carpeted shiny black stage, and we found a solution that it's like a garage floor sealant.
Yeah, essentially it's a fancy version of that garage floor sealant that you see. We didn't sprinkle the little things on it, if you know what I'm talking about. So it's just a flat. It's like a semi-gloss, basically black floor. One of the other things you can do is MDF and paint that, but you don't want to get it wet. So this was a cheaper way to go for us.
Yeah, it's super robust, which is great. We put an NTEC Storm in there, which is a lighting distro that essentially you run all of your universes to this one spot, and you can decide, does that location get that universe or not? And you can do that all digitally, which is really awesome.
ENTTEC.
Yeah, NTEC. We put in LED house lighting, not just conventional, 3200 bulbs in there, but we also put in LED lighting, like you see in the main out here. So we found that the connection between our stage experience and our seat experience is very important. And if we put all of the vibe and color, and if it's a different environment on the stage than in the seats, then it feels kind of spectator-ish. And so it was a cool way for us to kind of connect the room to the stage, which we were really happy with.
Colored LED house lights, if we weren't clear about that. Yeah.
And so it was just like, it's like a bigger version of these. It's just the Elation, it's like a big par. So not anything super fancy, but it makes a big difference in the room. In our lobby spaces, we decided to go with less TVs instead of like a ton of them. Like in this lobby, there's a lot of small TVs, and just doing less larger TVs to make a bigger impact. One system that we put in is really cool. It's called QSys, which allowed us to automate a lot of things. So QC makes this thing, and if you're working with an integrator, definitely bring it up because it is insanely flexible. One of the cool things that we're able to do with it is power sequence all of our TVs, and a really cool thing is in our lobby space, we put in a few different microphones, and what they do is they regulate the sound in that area of the lobby. So say if your lobby is like long, like it is here, you can set microphones throughout your lobby and say if this corner is like, people are just having a party, and then this corner is not. There's always the fight of like, having enough energy in your lobby with music and not blasting people out, that's like not fitting. And so it was a cool solution for that, so that automates it depending on the lobby volume of the people to match it, which was really cool.
QSYS, Q-S-Y-S.
QSYS. Also handles...
I'm just here for the spelling.
Yeah, that's right. Which is good, because I might be the worst speller on this planet. Yeah, I'm really bad. It also handles our video routing. And one of the things that we did in the process of this campus, this was our first campus that had a production staff member already. And so there's a few things that we learned in that process, and the importance of collaborating and incorporating that campus production lead into that process was huge. In the past, in a lot of avenues, that it can be, if you have a multi-site model, it can be, well, we're going to work on this as a central team, and then you're going to get what we come, all the great ideas that we come up with, which is very collaborative. And in this process, we got to work with an amazing, talented technician at that campus, and to come up with some really cool ideas, which was something that we didn't have the opportunity to do in the past, because it was either a campus that, because usually when we open a campus, we don't have a staff member for that campus. Usually that comes afterwards. So it was a really cool opportunity for that.
Yeah, so we've had contractors at most of our campuses. So right now we have production leads who are full-time staff members at 3 of our campuses. The other 6 we have contracted production leads, which is basically we pay you an amount of money to come in on Sundays and make the service happen, and then throughout the rest of the week they're doing their other job, and they're not at our campuses outside of Sunday morning. So that falls on our central team to make sure that systems are working, maintenance is happening, anything that breaks down, we're going in and fixing all those things. So that's what Paul's talking about, where this was the first campus that we've done where we have had a full-time staff production lead who we've been able to really work with and cater that campus and trying to make that campus the best it can be with someone who knows the culture of that campus and how they use their current building, moving into a brand new building, and him knowing the best ways to do a lot of different things. So that was a really great thing for us to be able to do that. So moving from the technician role of a production person into the creative role of a production person, it's a really important thing, and I think a lot of times our production staff at our churches, especially if you're a dedicated production person, you sort of get shoehorned into the IT technician role because you're the guy who knows how to push all the right buttons, you're the girl who knows how to plug everything in the way it needs to get plugged in. But the creative side, where you're actually a part of creating an environment, creating an atmosphere where the Holy Spirit can more easily move and removing distractions and trying to be a part of creating that environment, sometimes that gets put farther down on a production person's skill level as just people see them, like how they're looked at and thought about. And so thinking through creatively, I think our team has done a really good job of positioning our people and ourselves as a staff as creatives, because we are. We care about this stuff. We're not just the people who know how to do the technical things. We really are creatives, and we want a spot at the table when we're creating in different environments and talking about large events. And Sparkle is our largest event that we do every year. It's our women's conference, and last year we moved it off-site for the first time. So it had been in the main auditorium.
I think we have a picture of it. There it is. That's what
go.
it looked like.
So we were off-site. That's the Minneapolis Convention Center. It's a great room. That was the first time we've done an LED wall of that capacity. So those 4 sets of panels at the top there are actually angled, something like this. So we rigged that up like that. I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but in things like stage design planning, we were crucial in coming up with this stage design. So we were in creative meetings with communications and film and worship, but then we sort of met separately and came up with this plan and presented it and asked for input and stuff like that. So we were a big part of the creative process in creating this stage design.
Yeah, and that process was not like 3 meetings. It was a lot of meetings. Like 5 months beforehand, we met as a full creative team. So that means our worship, representatives from our worship team, representatives from our comm and design team, and from our film team and production, all met in the same space, maybe 10 to 15 different times. And so we had ongoing meetings the last 2 months. Every single week we had a meeting talking about where we're at, ideas, and how we're going to implement, and who's working on what, and all that sort of stuff. And it's easy to say that this event was our biggest creative win from a collaboration standpoint. And what's amazing in this process, this experience doesn't happen from one person's idea. This experience happens from a team of people working together and really making this thing happen. And there's so many things about this rig that you see a certain piece of it, you think back to the inspiration of that, and who brought the idea up, and all that sort of stuff. And everybody on the team carries such a big part of that. Even from the portrait I made to the stage design, to the special elements that we did, and the graphics and video content that we did. Everything was just, it was insane. It was one of those events that you finish doing, and you're like, how was I even a part of that? And that's what's really cool about the creative process on this that we learned was just the power of creativity. If you can walk into something that you had a part of and be blown away by it, that just shows that you're collaborating well. And so this event was a huge part of that. And another thing about this event is we came up with ideas, and we, because of our collaboration and the ideas that we came up with, we actually worked with companies to make this thing happen, that they were doing things for the first time. We worked with a company that had never angled a wall like that, ever. And so we're taking the braces to angle that wall out of the box, like, while setting it up. And it was the first time they ever did it. And I'm not gonna lie to you, there's a few times I was like, man, I hope this works. Because we worked really hard on this. But it was just cool, like, just to dream outside of the box, which we did on this event, and just to be able to say what if, have what if conversations, and work with really smart people to make that happen is awesome. And I don't know about you guys, I'm a huge Beyonce fan. I'm not afraid to admit it. I love Beyonce. I just do. I'm a part of B Nation. I love it. Single ladies, all of it. It's awesome. I listen to Beyonce in my car. I'm jamming out. It's the best. She just came out with her Coachella performance. If you haven't seen it, it's awesome. And one of the things that was crazy about watching that documentary is they spent 8 months in rehearsals for a 2-hour show. They had 3 sound stages. 8 months in rehearsals. That's not 8 months of planning and thinking about it. It's 8 months in rehearsals, which is crazy. And in the church world, we call ourselves creative, but this is what the world's doing. They're doing 8 months of rehearsals for a 2-hour show. In our Easter presentations, we show up a half hour earlier for rehearsals. What are we doing? But anyways, that's just goes into the creative process. Something that we learned with this process was the amount of time that it takes to put in, and the amount how early you have to start planning these processes to make it a win. And yeah, that's all I gotta say. I could go on rants about Beyonce, but I'll stop right there.
That was like our halfway point. That was a commercial break.
Yeah, there you go.
Brought to you by Beyonce.
Brought to you by Goofy.
All right, so so we're gonna get into some things where some of my passion points are. So when you're talking about doing a new building or a new project of any kind, like a large project, something you're updating in your room, or even as far as like a brand new building that you're creating, one of the things that I think is very important for us to do is to leverage our new tools for new creativity. Don't allow what you're buying and installing as gear goes to just be a better or easier version of what you're already doing. Once you have new tools to do new things, leverage that into being creative in new ways. You don't have a long window of opportunity sometimes to introduce new ways of being creative when you start a new project, when you finish a new project or when you're finished with a brand new building. Take advantage of the time where people are seeing the cool new tools to create new ways of doing things and to push the envelope and to try to get away from the things that you used to do with your old tools and do new, different things with your new tools. And do it right off the bat. One of the things that we do around here, and we're doing it with this conference, the LED wall that you see in there, that's like a test for us. That's a wall that I think we really could end up with permanently installed in that room. And we used one of our events as basically a test to see how we like it, how our leadership likes it, how it looks in the room, how it's functioning. So use your events where you get to do things that maybe you're not always allowed to do on a weekend, to stretch into new areas and to use your events to push your weekend experience forward. So the idea here is basically kind of 2 steps forward and 1 step back. When we do an event like Sparkle, like you saw in there, our weekends don't look like that. Like we can post those on Instagram and people might think that's what weekends look like. Our weekends don't look anything like that. Our goal for a weekend is completely different, and therefore the gear that we use and the choices that we make creatively are all different. Like we do things that you're seeing in our worship services right now that we don't do on the weekends because the goal's different. So the 2 steps forward, 1 step back, I kind of think we flex into some of our larger events, and then the release from that flex lands us at a little bit higher level for the standard normal stuff that we do, is just a little bit higher. So if I can use like a common thing that we all sort of understand is your weekend attendance at your church starts here at the beginning of the year, and we all spike at Easter, and we love to tell everybody that number. I have this many of my Easter services, or maybe you don't tell them it's Easter and just hope they assume that it's a normal weekend. Nobody does that? Yeah, that never happens, I'm sure. But the idea is, at least at River Valley, the way that it happens is we start at this level of attendance, we spike at Easter, and then we land at a new normal that's a little bit higher than what we were before Easter. Salvations happened, I think it was 813 salvations across our house at Easter, and those people are getting baptized the week after, and they're attending our services, they're getting plugged into our life teams, they're getting plugged into life groups, and those people are becoming a part of the team. The analogy here is when you flex a little bit into and have higher production levels of things and new levels of creativities in events that you're doing, where that lands you on your path of the new normal has to be higher than where you were before. Don't let your events pass and go right back to the new normal. You need to use your events in the best way that you can to try to make your normal something better, more creative, and at a higher level than it used to be. And one of the ways you can do that is working with your event staff. And we don't have an events like planning staff, but our River Valley Network runs our River Valley Conference. They're the ones who puts this whole thing on. And we worked with Caleb Rose, our network director, and talked through, okay, what are your goals for this conference? What do you want to see? When you walk out of conference and you're like locking the doors at the end, and you think through, man, that was an awesome conference. What are the things that are going through your mind that made that an awesome conference? And how can we help you as a production team to accomplish that goal? Those sort of things are what we need to hear, and then we can funnel that into areas where we can marry us trying to figure out new, better ways of doing things on our weekends and accomplishing the goals that he's trying to accomplish with his event. And the more you can do that, the more you can collaborate, the better everything is going to be for your new normal. I know I've said that 10 times, but that's the idea here.
Yeah, one of the things we're always challenging our staff is if we're getting a tool, let's make sure it's a tool and not a trick, and not not a flare, or not something that's just a fad. Man, when LED screens first started coming into play, everybody was so jacked on it. It's like, oh, we gotta get it. It's an LED screen, it's amazing. And for us, we had a lot of conversations with some event staff that was like, okay, but why? Why is it amazing? Well, you can put anything on it. You can do whatever you want. Well, yes, but how are we gonna use this tool? It's like buying a backhoe to screw in something into your TV. It's like, make sure you have the right tool for the job, because ultimately what we're trying to do is lead people to Jesus in everything that we do. And if we put something on stage that's a trick, that is just a spectacle for the sake of a spectacle, and people walk out and say, yeah, I remember that flying horse on the stage, that was real cool. That's a miss in church. People need to walk out and say, I see God differently.
That's good.
And our job in production is to create atmospheres to connect people to Jesus. That's what we do as a church. So why would we put a trick or a flare or a firework on stage without purpose and without the right moment? And man, that's so huge. And even in stage designs, and especially for all this stuff, it's something that we challenge all the time. And we start our conversations not, okay, here's the latest thing they did on the Grammys. Can we do it? And it's not that. It's exactly what Caleb's saying. What do you want to leave this room? What do you want people to leave your event remembering? And if it's remembering the taste of the brownies, then that is the wrong thing. It should all go back into that. Man, and one thing that I always have to challenge myself is to think outside of production. Are there things that I can bring to the table that connect people to Jesus without using something from production? Like, do I need to put all of my tricks on the table in order to make that happen? No, you really don't. And you could have somebody on this stage with one acoustic guitar and no microphone at all, and have an insane worship experience. Our Minneapolis campus, which is kind of like it's a lot of, I'll just say it, there's a lot of hipsters that go to that campus. Said it out loud. One thing that's really cool, revivals have started in the past historically with people, with college students, people in their 20s, which is awesome. There's so much culture there that can push your church. But one thing that's really just amazing about this campus is their production level at that campus is not very high. It's a terrible, terrible room. It sounds terrible. The lights are all, half of them are broken, and it's amazing. And there's been weekends where sound has gone off. We had a weekend where the subs sounded like they were about to launch to the moon. They were oscillating. It was noises I've never heard in my life. Ran down, turned off the amps, come back out, and people are singing at the top of their lungs. And people left the service and they're like, that was the best service ever. And from a production standpoint, I feel like it's so funny. We place so much importance on perfection in our services, thinking that's going to reach Jesus, but authenticity reaches people to Jesus.
Good.
And that's going to kind of push into our next segment of the leader segment. Going beyond the perfection of your teams and going into the culture and development of your teams. And here at Apple Valley, we've kind of been a beta test for this in the last year or so, which has fallen in line with our other serving teams. But one of the things that we found that was just incredible is building leadership structures within your teams. What does that mean? I'm about to tell you. So on the production team on the weekends, there are 5 coaches. There's one coach for lighting, one coach for pro presenter, media content, one coach for shading and switcher, and then 2 coaches for cameras. One's a Saturday coach and one's a Sunday coach. And what that means is that they have 4 to 8 people on their team that they schedule, that they train, that they develop, that they build the culture for. And so when it comes to the weekends, my involvement on Planning Center as far as scheduling is nothing. It's all theirs. And it falls in line with what Paul wrote about in Ephesians about equipping the saints for the work of the ministry. And what's amazing, I feel like in a lot of what I see in so many churches, you walk in and there's a guy, Dave is in the back, and Dave has been working on, he's like, yeah man, I volunteer at the church, maybe 30 hours a week, and I haven't had a weekend off or an event off in maybe 2 or 3 years, I honestly don't remember. And we have to be thinking about our teams in redundancy, not just our systems. And we have to be thinking about leaders in our teams. Like, what's the fallback? What's the fallback for Dave? If Dave doesn't show up to church, does anybody know how to run this thing? And what disservice is that to the church if the church can't run itself? And it's something that we really try. The goal of building these teams and these leadership structures is really that. Like, how can we, as staff, let go of the church so that the church can be the church? As a staff member at a church, should I view this thing as mine, and what I do, I make as mine? No, I should. I should be looking at it as, how can I give it away? How can I divide it up and give it to other people so that they feel like their thumbprint is on the church? Like we were talking about the collaboration with Sparkle, what's your thumbprint in your church, and what thumbprints are you giving to other people on your teams to make that happen? And the reality is, once you do that, and you divide that up, it gets a lot more complicated, and changes happen slower. As if it's just me making something happen, yeah, I could learn how to do program lights in a new way, or take camera shots in a certain way, or do this in a certain way, and change that when it's just me, and that could be faster. But the end game is that your team's going to be strong enough, and people are collaborating and feel like they have a voice in their church. And so building those coaches and those teams is really challenging. And I think for me as a production person, getting into the craft, being a creative person, getting into the craft, it's hard to share that, and it's hard to, there's so many learning things that come from that leadership process. And some of the things that have really hit me over the years is in talking to the coaches and meeting with them, having more conversations of what do you think conversations than this is what I want conversations. And for me, that's a lot of letting go of my opinion, which is fine. It's a lot of me saying, yeah, that's different than the way I would do it, and that's okay. And I think one thing that's interesting, and Caleb brought up this point at a roundtable that we were at, which was brilliant. Basically is this, as a staff member or as somebody who is more experienced on your teams at your church, you should never look at volunteers as less than. You should never look at your volunteer as a button pusher or somebody who's just like, I'm going to show you kind of the basic things of this, and you just do that from week in and week out. Because the reality is there's probably somebody in the church that can do that better than you. And there's probably somebody in the church that knows more about that than you do. And you thinking that you need to carry all of that is going to pull the team back. Your team can, sure, some changes might be slower, but you also might be the limiter, to be technical, audio guys. You might be the limiter on your team if that's all the hire you are. Like, if you're not good at rigging stuff, and there's a professional rigger in your church, you better go find that guy and be best friends with him and buy him coffee a bunch. Because when you're building your next stage design, you're gonna need that guy to help you build something. That's something for me. When we go into stage design mode, man, I'm having as many conversations with all of the contractors I know and everything. I'm like, yo, I had this midnight thought. What do you think of this? And they're like, no, that's gonna fall apart in 2 days. Got it, won't do that. Sounds good. Or even working with vendors. The amount, some people might look at vendors and say, I want to show how much I know. I don't want to look like an idiot. I love looking like an idiot and learning something new. It's great. And leaning on amazing vendors to say, hey, what do you suggest for this? This is what I'm kind of thinking, but could you guys fill in the blank with your experience? Yep. And man, that's so helpful. I'm getting a little off track. Back to leadership. One of the things that's so important in developing your leadership culture in your teams is just repeating vision. How we do this with our our volunteer weekend team is we meet for about 5 minutes after services, and we talk about a few things. We talk about what are some things that stuck out to you in the message, and it's really repetitive. I do the same thing every single